Welcome to the Honors Podcast.
I hope you're good. So where did you grow up originally?
So I'm from Maryland,
Maryland.
right? So generally, and no one's gonna be able to see this, but like I'm like 40 minutes south of Baltimore, 40 minutes
Yeah.
northwest of Annapolis, 40 minutes northeast of DC. I'm like right in that, like a perfectly triangle spot, right?
That's fun.
But
what
it's
type of like environment did you grow up in? Was it suburb, more woodsy, or like a city area?
total suburb. Like if you're not growing up like straight in the city, like because I'm surrounded by all those cities, like and there's definitely rural areas in Maryland, but like they're far out. Like there's Western Maryland, you get a lot of rural areas, and then Eastern, like across the bridge and stuff. But like all in that middle area is doomed to suburbia.
So like, what did you do for fun as a kid? Do you have like a game you love to play, sports, or movies and TV shows?
So I was
What's the Nate Hohensee childhood?
So I was always big into. I was never like a super big like video gamer, I guess I would say, but like I did play a lot of video games growing up. I wasn't really the sportiest kid. I did a little bit of soccer here and there, and then volleyball and tennis come high school, but it was not a stable of my personality.
Yeah.
But I was always also more of a solo video game guy. Like I was not like doing a lot of multiplayer stuff. So a lot of summers spent playing some solo games. I'm a big movie guy, so there's a lot of movies that I like to especially go to the theater and stuff. Like that was just like a pastime. I'd be like, oh, this is playing, right? And I'd find something like every other week or something like that. And then outside of that, music, right? Like Spotify, I would spend a lot of time like creating playlists.
Really?
This was like a pastime of mine,
Yeah.
and I'd try to find like all these weird niche like topics or ideas, and I make a playlist on it.
Oh, that's fun. What do you make a playlist based on?
So I've made playlists based off of just like certain like feelings, certain weathers, and then I'll do like then I would get like into I'll make playlists like for my friends, like not necessarily like music I know that they like, but music that like I feel like fits like their vibe.
Yeah.
Right. There was like a whole spot where I was like really into Percy Jackson and like Greek mythology, so I'd make one for like all the different Greek like god people, right?
Okay.
I thought that was interesting at one point in time in my life.
Have you been exposed to Epic, the concept album?
I have been exposed to Epic. I've yet to.
I listened to it the first time yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Quite long.
So like two of my absolute closest friends in the whole world, three actually, are really big into Epic, right? So much so that they all have, not together because they all like kind of know each other, but I'm the tie here, not them, right?
Yeah.
They all have the same sweater. It's the same baby blue like sweater that says Epic on the front. Like I'm pretty sure all three of them have it. Two of them wore it this past week. Yeah. So
yeah, when you have a chance, you definitely need to listen to it because it's the whole story of like Odysseus.
Yep.
And like it was pretty good, and like you get the whole story in song form.
Yeah.
And like I actually don't know the story, so I was kind of confused listening to it, but I was more listening to the musicality, and it sounded really good. It was well put together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so weird because I was at a conference recently. It was a long bus ride, and I was just like scrolling on Instagram as you do, and I started getting like exposed to it. It's like Epic, all this stuff. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I started listening to it. It was pretty good, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I definitely. Honestly, for them, I've got to do it. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying, like I'm not a big like show tunes guy, and I know it's not like. Is it a musical? I thought
it's a concept album musical for a proposed musical.
Okay, so
this
it's
is how musical production works. You got to write the album first.
before you.
Yeah, but because I always like look up research and all this stuff. I was looking up the guy, and like he wants it to become like an animated series or like animated movie, all that stuff, and then become like a live action movie and all that stuff. Which was interesting because when I was listening to it, I think it would work really well as an arena style.
Okay.
So like there's a central stage and it's either a full surround audience,
Right?
Not necessarily a traditional like Broadway style stage.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that would be cool.
yeah. Anyway, moving on
Yeah.
from that, I need your official introduction.
Okay.
Who are you?
My name's Nate Hohensee.
And what do you study? What are you involved in here at HPU?
I'm a major in political science and international relations with minors in philosophy and Spanish. And my big involvement outside of academics here is Charcoal Pony Improv. I'm in the improv troupe here.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Is political science international relations, is that like a major or is that a special?
Two different ones. So
Okay.
I'm double majoring, double minoring.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make that work?
So it's funny that you asked that because coming into college, I was dead set that I was going to be a lawyer. Like
Yes.
that was my original plan. Spoiler alert, I do not plan on being a lawyer anymore.
And that is great.
And that's fine. And that's totally just how it is, right?
Yeah.
But I was really ignorant to the whole process. Like when I was first looking at schools and stuff, and I was doing tours, and they'd be like, "Oh, what do you want to major in when you get to college?" And I was like, "I want to major in law because I want to be a lawyer." Little did I know that is not a thing. You can do pre-law, sure,
Yeah.
but like law itself is not a major at most colleges. So I've had to figure that out. So then I remember going home one day and looking up for myself, like, what majors get you into law school? Like, what are and the top two that I got in like a Google search were political science and criminal justice, right? And I was like, well, looking at the two, I'm like, I was always sort of politically involved back in high school. I elected to take AP Gov my senior year, and I loved that class. And I was always like kind of like sort of like involved in like sort of like the political scene ish like back in high school. And I was like, you know what, I could study that in college, right? So I chose that. And it's been great and I've had a great time, but I was always more drawn to international politics more than I was to domestic politics. So it took a little bit to figure out that I wanted to study international relations because I also didn't know that existed. Like I said, very ignorant to the whole process.
Yeah.
So I figured out, I learned about international relations and I was like, okay, I'm going to do both of these things together. And, you know, they were like, oh yeah, double major in those, like those kind of go together really well. And they do. And then alongside that, I knew that I wanted to study Spanish here because I've always really I've been taking Spanish since either the third or the fourth grade, something like that. But like they started us young. And I was one of two kids my freshman year of high school to test into Spanish 2.
Yeah.
So I was in a class full of sophomores my freshman year. So I met one of my best friends to this day. One of the guys who, and he actually went here. He graduated here last year. James Sandoval, shout out to him. But yeah, so I was like, I definitely want to study Spanish, and international relations required a specialization in a language. So it's like perfect. So the three go together really well. And then after some time, they went together a little too well, and they wanted me to graduate a year early. And would it have been a great financial decision? Perhaps, right? But I really wanted to have my full 4 years here at college. So I was like looking around, and I didn't want to just like I wanted to like maximize my time here taking classes, but I didn't want to just take like, I don't know, like silly classes just to take them,
Yes.
right? So I was really looking for something to add on to everything. And after some time, I was like, maybe I'll try out strategic communications. Maybe I'll try out Stratcom. And I took a foundations class here. I loved it. The professor, Nick Bazzelli, he was amazing. Had a great time. But then I went to go take like the class immediately after that and was just like, yeah, this is not really for me. So in order to like find out something else, I was like, okay, what's something that like I've always been interested in? Like what's something that like I've like always wanted to do? And honestly, the answer was philosophy. And I wanted to come in freshman year doing philosophy, but at that point in time, again, like
Lawyer.
just did not lawyer, but I didn't realize how those lined up. Like
Yes.
like those line up actually really well. Like a lot of people who go into law, who become lawyers, study philosophy. Like this is actually really helpful. But I didn't realize that. Like I thought that like, oh, if you study philosophy in college, like your job after college is going to be like a philosophy professor. Like I didn't realize, you know, just the mobility you have after just getting a degree. Because a lot of, you know, freshmen when they're coming in are very much like,
they don't do the research.
Well,
and they're not taught how to either.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't tell them how versatile you can really be. And obviously there's caveats to that, but I think for the most part, like I think back to like my childhood, like the youth pastor I had back in my church, like he was an amazing guy. Yeah, what was his degree in? It was either electrical or mechanical engineering. Like it was something like just you might get a degree in one thing, but you might have a job in a completely different area in your life, and it just you never know where you know life is going to take you. So I didn't think that philosophy would be too lucrative, but then coming back to it, I was like, you know what? I've got all these other things going on. I'm just going to throw philosophy in there, and I'm glad I did because I love it so much.
Yeah, you bring up the interesting point about your major is not your job. And that's something I really appreciate Dr. Hedman, our director, who kind of drilled into us during colloquium. And he would be like, look at these people who major in one thing and they immediately did something else after college. And he was like, yeah, they don't really care what your major is after your third job. And like, it really helped take the stress off of that in that regard. Well, it's while also still maintaining that we're passionate about this subject. And he was kind of encouraging us to pursue our passions more than what we think is going to get us a good job. Because that's ultimately what you really need to decide on when majoring in college. So,
right.
Yeah, I know if you appreciated that.
No, 100%. And that's where a lot of this realization came from was during my colloquium with Dr. Hedman. Like that was, I remember having the conscious thought, like, I don't even know what was going on that day, but I don't think I was like fully paying attention. He was doing the presentation about like, it was quite literally on the subject of top majors to help you get into law school. Right?
Yeah.
It was quite that literal, right? And as soon as he mentioned philosophy, like I perked up and I looked over and I was like, wait. So you're telling me I could have done this, right? But it took me a little while to get there because I was like, I was just afraid of like, but what if I, you know, like, I feel like this might be better for me or something. And I just wasn't so sure. So I was like, instead of just like, I don't know, changing majors or whatever, I just decided I'd just like, grab things as I went along. Yeah. Because I didn't start philosophy until my junior year.
Yeah. It's been working out pretty well. You got this nice blend of political science and national relations, philosophy. What was the other minor?
Spanish.
Yeah. I should know that. I have my Chinese minor too. So I understand the language minor.
Yeah.
Struggle and appeal. But it's really great. So political science, I feel like that's a major that has some interesting perceptions around it. So what is a political science major and what like is the outcome of that?
So political science, you spend a lot of time talking about, well, obviously politics, right? But whereas most of your classes will be about domestic politics, there are exceptions. One of my favorite poli-sci classes I took my freshman year was Global Studies Composition for Political Systems. Yeah. A bit of a mouthful for our class name, but it was with Dr. Witt, and you'd spend that class talking about other countries' political systems and how, like, our democratic republic differs from a constitutional monarchy. Like, you know, you have, like, how different a parliamentary system is. We talked a lot about just like democracies at large in the world. We were going on Freedom House. It's a website, and they rate different countries based on how like free they are in like certain aspects, both political and like civil. And it's really interesting. So a political science degree, you spend a lot of time talking about politics, but also you can see how like there is a scientific aspect to it, right?
Yeah.
I took
Like this is in the vein of like social science.
It is. So it is kind of like in the same camp as like psychology and sociology, right? Like it is a science. It's not as like sometimes always as tangible and concrete as biology, right? Because there are so many aspects of it that are qualitative, right? But yeah, my sophomore year, I took political science research methods, and we were quite literally looking at experiments. Like this is like a thing. Like people are like, oh, you can't do like experiments that have actual results, and it's like, oh, well, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at a lot of experiments going on in like Mexico. That we spent that semester. We talked a lot about how you can gauge like whether or not like a cop will ask for a bribe, like based off of your own like what car you drive, your own clothing and whatnot. Like this was very specific to there as opposed to here, but it was just interesting, and there were ways to empirically test that.
Yeah. What are like the data sets we pull from in America, let's say? Because I know we have like the Buzz one is like the Pew Research Center.
Yep.
Which I found out
That's
has
a big
only
one.
been a thing since 2004.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Which you would think it's like been here since the beginning of time.
2 years older than it.
Yeah. That was the year I was born. So
Really?
I'm as old as the.
You were as old
Research
as
Center.
Pew.
Yeah, that's my fun fact for the day.
That is fun.
Yeah.
We do pull from them a lot. And that's where I used a lot of my data. Especially I took a class last year on foreign policy. And there was a whole Pew Research Center data set that we used to look at. They had it was like this like big questionnaire, and they polled people from all these different countries based off of like sentiments going on in their own nation's politics, and then also looking at America, and we were able to just kind of like analyze that. And we each had a different country we specialized in. So that semester, I believe I was Australia.
Yeah. That's a good country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have like one of like the safest cities in the world or something.
Yeah, I really want to go.
Yeah.
I'm a big travel nut. So.
Someone challenged me to do like an Australian accent the other day because I was being a little boastful. I was like, oh yeah, I can do any accent or impression. Give me something. And they said Australian. And I was like, okay, what's that one guy? Crockett with the R ones.
Yeah, Steve
It's hard
Irwin.
for me because I slip into country. They're like very close in their vocal placements. But yeah, Australian's hard.
But
Great
it's like
country,
British, but it's not. It's like British if it was country.
I know Millie Bobby Brown describes it as like Australian is in the back of her throat, American is in the like back top of the throat, and then British is in the teeth.
Yeah. And it's so impressive too because like a lot of our like famous actors today are Australian, and they just but they can do like British and American accents so well, like so on point. Yes. And then you'll like be watching interviews of them, and they'll just be like, well, I can't even do an Australian. I was gonna try, but I can't give it. Like, no, I just can't. But they'll just be like, oh yeah, it was really like it was really easy like getting like these voices down, all kind of stuff, because it's like, and then it's like so hard for us to like do.
Yeah. Rebel Wilson talked about it, and she explained it really well. Is that American, we engage all the muscles and like smiling. Australians, they relax it a lot, and they're like, crocky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crocky, it's a tarantula. Kangaroo.
That's pretty good.
So yeah, that's really fun. Anyway, political science.
Yes.
I was doing some research on this.
Okay.
And the history of its studies. So political science kind of emerged out of social science studies. And I did it specifically in America, but there's a lot of great international relations as well. Do you know who the father of political science is?
Is it Weber?
No. You'd be surprised by this.
Really?
The official father of political science is Aristotle.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was surprised by that too. It's like, oh, philosophy connection.
Yeah, he's father a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah, because like back in like ancient Greece and Rome, politics were very much philosophical
Yeah.
as well, and
Yeah.
the root thing was like, but what is the ethics of this and all that fun stuff. But he's the official father of all that, which was interesting. But then in America, there's been some interesting history within the last 100 years. So I want to share this breakdown of history I found for you. So starting in the 1890s through the 1940s, we had political scientists and social scientists helping with like basically they were kind of holding the government accountable by being like journalists and critics and all that stuff. And then we kind of see these think tanks emerge.
Right.
When I thought the Pew Research Center was going to happen, but apparently not. So it became this really big thing. And then getting into the 50s and 60s, this was like the height of political science as a career. Like a political scientist, they were very non-judgmental about calling out the government and like being giving them their commentary of it, and of course like analyzing the data systems and all that, and like labor movements and all that fun stuff. And they had a strong influence on public policy because they got a lot of strong funding for their think tanks. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then we get into the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It goes downhill a little bit from here because previously they were also growing with their research methods because of computer analysis. So they're able to get larger data sets and larger survey research stuff. And it was seen as that honorable and respected position. And then that started to go away a little bit, starting from the 60s all the way to the 2000s, because we have the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, 90s war on drugs, among other things, and all that crazy stuff. And political scientists also started criticizing themselves and all that stuff because they weren't able to contribute to that overwhelming problem of all that stuff going on. So they both lost funding and respect.
Yep.
And then also the young generation lost interest in that area of study as political science. So the numbers also dwindled in that regard. So that was really interesting as well, which also kind of developed this stigmatized view of political science and then also politicians as well.
Yep.
Because we kind of have this like negative, the like greedy and like all this stuff, but that's kind of more of a recent development post 2000, circa 2000. Before that, it was very much like respect is like, oh, we're like making such a strong government, strong country, the idealism of the 50s and all that fun stuff. So we're kind of on the tail end of that era. Like you're kind of like the second generation to come out of that into professional maturity. So the question with political science and social scientists and like what is the role of a political scientist, the question has become like what is their role in influencing public policy, and what is their role in this newfound society? What do they contribute?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
it's both rhetorical and I need you to answer.
So definitively not rhetorical. It's interesting that you would say like all that stuff with the history, because it does make sense when you think about it, because like as our view of politics changes, and honestly as our like nationalistic sentiment kind of like waxes and wanes, right? Like you can see the growing or depleting interest of political science, right? With the favor for or against politicians, right? Think about it, like, the 50s, you were saying, that was kind of when things started to boom, right? And my first thought was like, interesting that they would be, like you were saying, that they could like kind of go against what was going on there, because you see we're going into McCarthyism there, like more so like I believe 60s, right? But it's kind of going into that realm, right? So speaking against the government wouldn't necessarily be a big thing. But the more and more I thought about it, I was like, well, this is kind of like post-World War II, right? Yeah. Nationalism is at a pretty good high, I would say, right? And I think what dropped it later on, you mentioned like Vietnam, like big example, right? Goes down, right? So you see like a lot of a depletion in interest there. So like one thing we talk about in political science is like right now in the year of our Lord 2025, right? We see this heightened level of political anger, right? Like people are very pessimistic when it comes to politics and politicians. The big thing outside of the last election, 2020, right? Not the past one we just had, but the one previous, right? No matter what side you were on, a lot of the critiques you would hear is like, we just have like two old guys running against each other. Like, what's going on here, right? And like, it's like, no matter what, you're going to have an angry outcome either way. And a lot of people, and I've heard this so much, a lot of people talk about how, oh, we've never been this polarized in our country. And I'm like, well, hold up. We had the Civil War. So, yes, we have been. But also, we can, in poli-sci, we can look back and we can see it comes in waves. Yeah. Like, our political anger, it, like, rises up to, like, a point, right? And then it'll drop back down. Like, the rising we saw from, like Korean War and Vietnam and all that kind of stuff, one thing that dropped it back down, oddly enough, and one thing that like brought the country together, unified it, that brought in a big national sentiment, 9/11, right? Like, that was a big thing that like there was a lot of like division beforehand, right? And then that kind of brought us together. And since then we've risen again, right? So it's just kind of like this thing that we're going to see kind of going back and forth. So what specifically would the role of like political science people when it comes to like
observers of the government,
right? And
from these like think tanks and journals like New York Times and other like there's like a political science magazine that gets published every year. It's a pretty big deal, I found out.
Yeah. And I would say like one of the main goals is just to, like any informed citizen should, right? But not a lot of us are. Like, I'm not that we're not informed citizens, but like, the average everyday citizen isn't staying super like up to date with every political move going on, right? One thing for political science people is that like you can see what's going on in the government, and because we have a context of our own history along with other like nations' histories, right? You can kind of keep us like as a nation in check, like policymakers, right? You can put things into context, right? Like, a lot of people will look at politicians and say, oh, they're greedy, or oh, they're just doing this because of XYZ. It doesn't make any sense, right? But when you actually go back and analyze what's going on, right? Like, you can make sense of a lot of things, right? So I'd say one thing for going forward, right, is I would say like the importance of like educated people in political science in our communities, like just like when it comes to like talking about politics, but also like lobbyists in Congress, right? Because like I don't know the background of every member of Congress, right? But like, and some of them might have degrees in political science, but I would wager that most might not, right? Probably a lot of them are businessmen, right? A lot of them are lawyers, but not just because you're lawyers doesn't mean political science, right? Like, it's keeping like the country both in check when it comes to like policy that gets like kind of out of hand, but also helping the public understand like what's going on in our politics, right? Because like the more and more like I'll be in like classes on more, not to say rudimentary political topics, right? But I guess you could say, to an extent here at college, right? You kind of go to realize that there's a lot of people who don't really understand how our politics work and how things came to be. A lot of people like talk about like one thing that not a lot of people like, let's say like the Patriot Act that came after 9/11, right? Because you can have your own opinions on like what that did or what that didn't do, but it gave the bureaucracy, like in the CIA and all that kind of stuff, a lot of power, right, to overstep things such as like the Fourth Amendment, right, in certain areas, not in all the areas, right? It's not like they took it away in one fell swoop, right? But like a lot of people are like, oh, how could our Congress, how could our our nation's leaders have done this, right? When you look at it, I'm like, it was actually being proposed a lot before 9/11. This wasn't like a new thing since, right? And it had actually been turned down time and time and time again. Then 9/11 occurs, right? It gets brought up again. And I don't remember the exact turnaround that happened between it being proposed to Congress and it being like signed into law, but it was like somewhere between, I don't know, like 7 or 17 hours. And if you've looked at the whole like law, it is thick. It is not, that was not enough time for all of those lawmakers, all of them, to have read through all that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look back and it's like they really didn't really know what they were signing into law. So it's just like there's a lot of context that we can get, right? And just being informed about our politics. Like right now I'm taking a class on constitutional law and like how the laws of our country have been shaped through the court cases over the years and how that looks differently, right? So I mean, one thing for people in political science, right, to be like forthright and forthcoming about like what goes on when it comes to the Supreme Court, right? And I think one of the more minor tragedies right now is, I mean, as we've also seen, Supreme Court has gotten a little bit more polarized, like has become more political, I should say, over the years. So that's a bit of a slight tragedy there. But it's not to say that, they're not doing their best job, right? But I digress.
Very cool. That's a good explanation, all that fun stuff. It made me think of, I was talking to a previous guest, Mac Mullins.
Yep.
Yep. He went to Turkey last semester, and he had to like live with a host family and all this stuff. It was super cool. And Turkey just came out of like the Soviet Union and all that stuff, so they have a fairly new government and all that stuff. So he was over there with his host family, and they would talk a lot. And I asked him, did you have to like explain the American government system to them? Because I know I cannot. Because it's complicated.
Oh, 100%.
Like I voted last election.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what that did, or electoral college and all that stuff. Like I didn't even vote in my state, but like I did vote in my state. I don't know.
What's your state again?
It's Georgia.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But like I'm obviously here in North Carolina, and so I did a mail-in ballot, I think.
Yep.
I don't know. My parents like kind of did it for me. And
Yeah.
I was like, yay. Okay.
Woohoo.
It was fun.
And it's like, and it is important to vote. Like, I think people talk about like, oh, I'm not happy.
I'm surprised that's like an issue for our generation, which I kind of get the sentiment, like what we were saying, it's hard to be an informed citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's the extent of responsibility to be informed? Because obviously we all got lives, we all got careers.
Yep.
Not all of it is related to the government, but we are still a democracy. So like, we're citizens of America, so we have to play a role in the government, question mark?
I would say, and because we have the right to vote.
Yes.
And a lot of other people in a lot of other countries don't have that same right. I would say as informed citizens. Like I know it's a form of, political protest. Like, oh, I'm not happy with either candidate, so I'm just going to like not vote. And that is, I understand the argument being made there, right? Or I just don't, the one I don't fully understand is, I just don't have enough time to like, understand either one, so I'm just going to not vote. And I'm like, well, you probably do, right? You probably have enough to get like a gist on either candidate. And I would say, if you're going to, like, in order to be a informed voter, I would say it's important to know or to have an idea of who you're going to vote, like going into it, right? And I would say the test for that would be, okay, you want to vote for X candidate, right? Well, have someone or just ask yourself, why am I voting for them? And you should have tangible reasons, like at least probably 3, right? That you can sit there and say, I'm going to vote for them because of this policy that they want to enact, and I would say probably focus it more on them, right? Because if you sit there and be like, well, I want to vote for them because, well, Y candidate did this, this, and this I don't like. I'm like, well, okay, is that a strong reason? Because like, I think it's stronger to want to to get, because you're giving your voice, right? You're giving your opinion. You're putting your sway into the government, right? So I would say it's more important to know why you're going to vote for someone than why you're going to vote against someone else, in my opinion, right? And this is like, and I know no one has the time to sit there and be like, informed in all their primaries and caucuses and whatnot, right? But one thing that I get frustrated about is when it gets to the presidential election, they're like, oh, how come we have two candidates who just don't seem fit? I'm like, well, you should have been a little bit more involved in the primaries and the caucuses, because that's where you see the extent for both Republicans and Democrats in our nation, right? Like, you get to see the wide array, the range of the people you're dealing with here, and be like, well, like, I think this person would be a good fit, and this person would be, but nobody pays attention to that. So usually we end up getting some extreme out of it, right? Because, who pays attention to it, but, the extremists, I guess. But I digress.
You digress. Okay. Now I do want to transition a little bit to your lovely philosophy,
yes,
lifestyle, all that fun stuff. Since we do still have kind of our lovely political science stuff in our mind, how does or should philosophy influence political science or the government itself?
Well, so I'm going to start by prefacing with, when I was starting my philosophy journey here at High Point, the first class I took, because I just wanted to make sure that this was something I wanted to do, right? Not just like some weird fever dream that I had, right? Yeah. I took a class that was going to double count for both philosophy and political science, because if I ended up not liking philosophy, I could just have it count for my political science stuff, right? And that was political philosophy with Dr. MacArthur. Shout out to Dr. MacArthur. She's amazing. But that class, the entire time we spent looking at different philosophers and their views on the government, right? And what the government should look like, right? So, like, one thing that, like, you can do when it comes to, like, Aristotle did it, right? And it was interesting you bring it up, because we studied him. We studied John Stuart Mill. Studied a couple different people, right? But a lot of what we looked at was just looking at what a government could be, right? I think we focus so much on, oh, well, this is what we've had. This is what, we're going to have, right? And a lot of the beauty of what I look at when we look at the Constitution in the U.S. and kind of the advent of America, right, is they didn't just settle for, they were just leaving a monarchy, so they didn't want to, right? But they didn't just settle for, like, well, we only knew one thing, which was, like, I guess Parliament, so we're just going to, like, stick with that. Like, no, like, they, it was more so looking at, like, what can it be, right? So we were looking at different forms of government, right? We looked at, obviously the difference between, like, a republic versus a parliamentary system, but also, we looked at, like, anarchical systems. Like, what does that look like? Like capitalist anarchy, right? I think that's how you'd refer to that, but it's really interesting, right? Because, like, that kind of system, it would be like, there's no, like, one set government, but you kind of have, like, these communities, right? And, like, there's no government to, like, give you anything, but let's say, like, someone robs you, you just hire, like, a police to go back and get your stuff, right? Yeah. Like, or you hire people to defend you. It's very, like, and you do business, right? And if people do, it's so interesting. I found it so fascinating, right? But so, yeah, like, one of the fun aspects, I think, of philosophy and how we can view the government is, like, we it's not about political science is looking at what the government is, what it does, and what it's doing, right? Whereas philosophy looks at what it can be, what it should be, like, what, like, should the government be doing, like, in response to such a thing. I took a class on the morality of globalization, and it was really fascinating because we looked at how a lot of philosophers have tried to put their influence on. Obviously, they're not lawmakers themselves, so they can't, make anything. But we just talked about, like, based off of certain philosophic tenets, right? Like, how should the government respond to natural disaster or to poverty or to, like, these kinds of things. It's really interesting because it doesn't just, like, take the world at face value, but rather it more so looks at what, it's more theoretical, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, straight up application, right? But we look at, like, how would this apply? Like, how,
like, how we would get there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice.
I mean, like, not specifically, like, obviously it's like, like, well, you'd have to change the laws, right? That's more like the straight up poli-sci side would be like, oh, how do you change your government, right? As it is, right? But, like, we kind of look at, like, look, if we were trying to be a society that wanted to do more X, right? How would we put laws in place that would do, like, what kind of laws, what kind of systems would we put in place to ensure, the decrease of certain societal vices, right?
That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
How have the rest of your philosophy classes that are not directly political science kind of been influencing?
Influencing political science?
Yeah.
Because, like, the rest of my philosophy classes, we look at just, like, different philosophers and, like, kind of their just views on life in the world, right? So there are aspects that you could, if you wanted to tie it to politics, you very much could, right?
Yeah.
But they're way more tied to you as a person, you, like, morally and existentially, right? Less so looking at, what a policymaker should do or what a politician should do, and more so looking, I guess, the bigger connection would be you or me as a citizen, right?
Yeah.
And, like, following laws versus not following laws, right? Or, like, kind of like, what does that look like for you personally?
Yeah. What was your? Did you do Here Be Dragons or?
I did do Here Be Dragons.
Great. You had a different philosophy teacher though.
I had I started off with Dr. Allen with British history.
Oh, that was my order too.
Yep, you started with her.
Yeah, she was my home section.
And then we moved on to Dr. Toole, God rest his soul. And then with a Buddhist theology and Vedic thought.
Yeah.
Right. And then I had Hedman with Elizabethan drama.
That's good. So same setup, except my philosophy section was by Dr. Brophy.
Mm-hmm.
You know him?
I actually have not had Dr. Brophy. I've not had the pleasure.
Yes. Okay, so this will be interesting. So he was all about kind of personal identity theory, and then also simulation theory as well, which really tied in well to the whole map stuff, map of self and map of the world, and are we in a simulation or not? And this was what I ended up writing my final paper on. I combined the Boudica and simulation theory.
Interesting.
And I was like, I argue that Boudica was living in a simulation because how they were on an enclosed island, that was their whole world.
Yeah.
So it was basically a simulation where they had an outside invader from a higher simulation coming over and invading them, much in the same way as one of the philosophies we talked about, which is the thought experiment I want to walk you through.
Okay.
So, Nick Bostrom.
Nick
Bostrom. He's alive currently, so
okay.
He hasn't gained that died legacy fame.
He sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a Swedish philosopher.
Okay.
Who explores a lot of AI ethics, bioethics, and the resulting existential risks that come with that. And in my section of Here Be Dragons, we talked about his simulation theory.
Yep.
So kind of like the Matrix, the idea that we're all living in a simulation. He has the theory that if current technology and advancements continue, we might get to a point where we would run what is called ancestor simulations. So we would simulate our ancestors or our forefathers and all that stuff, which purely statistically far outnumbers whoever exists in the present. and all that stuff. So if that occurs, it is more likely that we are currently in a simulation because we are the ancestor simulations being run from the future.
Right.
And all that fun stuff. So in 2003, he proposed a trilemma. There are 3 potential possibilities of society in which these simulations either do or do not exist. So the 3 possibilities are, 1, either human-level civilizations have never and never will reach this level of technological advancement to be able to run complete simulations of environmental, sensational, and consciousness simulation. Second possibility is that human civilizations have reached this stage of advancement, but for either moral or ethical reasons that we can't understand now, they decide not to run ancestor simulations. And then the third possibility is that we have reached this level of advancement and we do run ancestor simulations, in which case we very much likely are in one, because purely there are more likely to be more simulated worlds and minds than there are purely biological ones.
Interesting.
Yeah, and those are the only 3 potential outcomes of society. And in my Hero Dragon section, we had to determine the percentages of which one we think is likely. That had to add up to 100%.
Okay.
And we had a really interesting discussion based off of it. I don't remember what we ended up deciding, but
I was gonna say, do you remember what you where you put those percentages? Or?
Well, in an egotistical, narcissistic sense, I don't want to be in a simulation. But I also do feel like we will technologically advance to that point. But then I also feel like there might be some greater, because you can also think about simulation and a dimension type thing, where a lot of, if you look at it through a religious lens as well, we could say we have our environment, but then there's a world beyond it. That would basically be the same thing. We're in Christianity, we have God, we're God's simulation, basically.
Interesting thought.
Yeah. So that was one way to think about it. And then I was like, I don't know. So we might actually be in a simulation. But then the comforting thought was that it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Because, and this was quoted really well in Free Guy with Ryan Gosling.
I need to see that movie yet.
Great movie. Wait, not Ryan Gosling, Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, yes.
Ryan Reynolds. Great. And it's a really great positive portrayal of AI. It was really good. You need to watch that as well. But in that, he was having a crisis that he was in a video game, but he was conscious and all this stuff. And he was panicking to one of his AI video game friends about it. And he was like, is this real right now? And are you feeling me love you right now? And he was like, yes. And then it doesn't matter because we are experiencing something real. And because we'll never be able to get out of the simulation, because it's also, in this theory, it's not like the Matrix. There's not a body we have that's outside the simulation. We are fully created within the simulation ourselves. So this is our reality and our world.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter whether we're in a simulation or not, because this is our reality.
Yeah. And I would have to agree, right? When it comes to people talking about simulation theory and talking about, what does that mean? Does nothing matter, right? I'm like, okay, put it in the sense of a binary. We either are living in a simulation or we are not, right?
Right.
Either way, if we're going to the fullest extent of following, the thought experiment, we will never know. We'll never know. There's no way any one of us could prove for a definitive fact that we are in a simulation. Just wouldn't be possible, right? So it almost begs the idea that the question in itself, are we living in a simulation, doesn't matter, because we can never find out the answer. We can't go about our lives thinking that, oh, well, we are, right? Because you can't assume one or the other, right?
Yeah.
So we can't go about our lives assuming, oh, well, we are in a simulation, so nothing I do matters, so I'm just going to do whatever, right? Because you could very much be wrong, right? You weren't living in a simulation, and then what did you do with your life, right? Or, what did that I guess, sentiment of despair, really, how did that bring you to act, right? But then I guess that does also beg the thing. It's like, well, you can't know that you're not, right? Sure, right? But how is that going to change your life? It simply doesn't, because you can't leave the simulation, right? And the only life you know is the one put in front of you. The only life you know is the one around you. So care for what you can care about, right, in this moment, in this present day. I mean, the whole theory to me, it's funny because do you know when this was presented by Nick, what was his last name?
Nick Bostrom.
Bostrom. Do you know, like, kind of like roughly when he was around? Was this like 20th century?
David, this guy?
Yeah.
He's still alive.
He's still alive. Oh, that's right. That's right. So this is post Descartes, right?
Yes.
And so Descartes talked about the great deceiver, right? And he had the same exact thought. Like, what if everything that we're experiencing is all in our heads, and it's either like, I don't know, something produced, like, say this is like all a dream, or all a like, kind of like when you're like dying, your neurons are firing off. Like, what if we're experiencing like a second life that's not actually happening, right? Or he talked about like more of a like a demonic element, or something, like someone who is making us experience this, right? As much as we can sit there and worry about that, right, at the same time, we know that we're here. We know that we have free will. At any moment in time, like, I don't know, if I wanted to throw this pen across the room, I could. I'm not going to, right? But I can, right?
Yeah.
It's in my capability. There's a lot of things in my capability. We are radically free beings, right? And it goes to the whole saying, I think, therefore I am, right? I have the ability to think for myself, to act for myself, to do what I would like to do, and I there's nothing that's forcing me to do it either way. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there is, right? The idea to me of the whole simulation theory, it does seem far-fetched. Like, if I had to go down and look at the three different possibilities of like is it that, we won't ever reach this technology, we won't do it because of more reasons, or we have? I think the least likely of the three is that we have reached it.
Really?
I don't think it's very likely, right? Just think of the computing power that would have to go into simulating the world.
I agree. And there's,
Kierkegaard?
Yeah.
Yes.
He has a really good episode on this about like what it would take to, like, the computing power to create a simulation.
Oh, really?
And like it would be very hard, like it would be limited.
Yeah.
But it was still like posing like, you have to consider higher dimensions, in his lovely voice.
And right, and like, yeah, I guess, but that would, just looking, and this is me basing it off of the technology we have right now.
Yeah.
Because if this was an ancestral simulation, like, clearly they had to be going pretty far back. And I know technology rises at an exponential rate, right? And I have no idea what the future will bring us, right? But just think of, like, there are now 8 billion people on this planet.
Yeah.
Think of all the different animals on this planet, the weather patterns of this planet, all the seismic activity of this planet, the electromagnetic currents, all of that. Like, that is, to have all of that. And I'm sure, like, there's going to be someone out there who's like, it's possible. We just need the, I don't know. And that's just looking at Earth, right? Then there's, like, I feel like you would have to simulate the universe, right? Like, at large. You would have to bring in the solar system, and from there the galaxy, and from there the observable universe, right? Like, that's asking a lot of a computer.
Yeah.
And I just don't think, I don't know. I don't think it's very plausible. That's me. I'm not saying it's not possible, because anything is possible, right? But I would say that is. So to me, the most likely of the three is that human civilization will never reach the level, and not out of the fact that it's impossible for us to do it. It's not out of the fact that it's impossible for the feat to be done. I just don't think that human civilization will honestly be around for that, right? Mm-hmm. Not that I, think that we're going away anytime soon, but I do think that like if we've reached that level, there's definitely something else going on. Like, because like as technology rises, that's all technology. It's not just computing powers. That's also like like weapons technology, and you got to think of all the things that go on in the world, right? Yeah. So I'm like, I can't.
The life barrier.
Right. What's it? Yeah. The what is that called? The screen, the great filter. That's it.
The great filter.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like we would reach that before we reach a computing level.
I also narcissistically don't want that to be true.
Well, I think we're past that.
You think we passed the great filter?
Yes.
Well, because there's multiple great filters. The first great filter is just like molecular life. Mm-hmm. And then another filter is solar system colonization, mm-hmm. and galaxy colonization. Mm-hmm. It's this whole theory about whether trying to explain why we haven't found other alien mm-hmm. life as much as some people think we have.
Yep.
That's a whole nother awesome can of worms. But
I think if we had it would be more definitive.
Yeah. I always think about like what would it take to like prove that aliens exist?
It would need to be a life form, quite literally from another planet that.
But how many people need to see it?
How many people need to see it? I don't know. I mean, I think of like when NASA or whoever finds things in space. Like I've never seen Kepler 2b, but like I know it's out there.
Yeah.
So I mean. And that's just like a photograph, right? So I'm like, yeah. I don't know where they'd be finding these things because you got to think like, okay, well we have rovers on like what, Mars,
many moons of Saturn,
right? So I mean, if they were there and like they had, samples or whatever, I would be like, yeah, sure. But when people talk about like, I don't know, like, oh, aliens have to exist, I'm like, they don't. They don't have to exist. I'm not denying the fact that they may.
Yeah.
But I think people are a little bit too.
Do you think they want to be comforted by that fact? Because
that we're not alone.
They don't want to be alone.
And I find that to be an interesting notion because I am more comforted in the fact that we are alone, which is weird.
Which I also feel like goes into narcissistic. Oh, we're special.
But it does. It 100% does, right? Yeah. Because,
are we special or are we just lucky we passed that one great filter?
Right? Like, I mean, we look at look at our own planet Earth here. I mean, we are the dominant species on this planet, right?
Yeah.
If we were to find alien life, right, somewhere else out in the world, in the universe, right? I'd be more comforted if it was like single-celled or like, maybe like kind of like smaller, like sort of like plant life, right? But the second that we start finding like, animal like kind of life or not even to mention like intelligent life, that's when you gotta worry. I mean, like I'm not saying that we should be worried, but like it's just like I think people want that to exist because they don't want to be alone, but at the same time, and they use the vastness of the universe as a proof that life exists out there somewhere. And the very thing that I ask them is like, okay, well, how do you create life? And they're all like, oh, well, I don't, like electricity or like like a lot of things. And I'm like, nobody can just create life, right? So somehow on this planet, life came to be, right? And many different people have different things to say as to how that happened. But the one thing we can all agree on is nobody has a definitive answer, right? So because no one can even define that for our planet, how can we assume that for others?
Maybe that's the next great filter, is to understand like how and why life came to be.
Right. It's a fascinating thought. I mean, like, I'm Christian myself, right? So, I believe in God as the mover here, right? But for people who aren't, right? I always like to joke. It takes a lot of faith to be an atheist.
Yeah.
It takes a lot.
That's a good clip.
Because it's like the first thing you have to have faith in is that the universe just came to be, right? That it just happened. That like out of nothing spawned everything, right? And then from there, like domino, right? Eventually we get Earth, and then just life just also came to be.
Yeah.
But I guess no one can definitively prove anything, so it leaves the debate open.
Sometimes I wish I could like watch it like after I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what happens.
Right.
I need to know what happens at the end of the story.
We need to have like after we die, like there needs to be like a life highlight reel.
Of like my own life or like all of life?
All of life, including your own, right? Like there needs to be like a page for you to be like, okay, like
in the purgatory waiting room.
Yeah, right. Like sitting here like, well, you can go back and like play all the clips of all the nice things people said behind your back. Like, be like, wow, like, because the things that you would have never known in your own life that people said, but like all that kind of stuff. But then also like just the answers to the universe, like how did life happen? How did we get here? Right?
Oh yeah.
How did the universe start? Like one of those documentaries, like like almost like a David Attenborough style, like but just like the beginning of life or the beginning of the universe.
Who would you want to narrate the documentary?
I feel like the most stereotypical answer would be Morgan Freeman, just because in a lot of cinema, like this is not to say him as a person, but like people, he's being cast in the role of God a lot, right? Like this is not to say that he has any sort of alignment with the divine, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure he's a great guy, but that's the first thought, right? But I don't know.
You went Maggie Smith.
Really?
Yes.
She'd be interesting. She would be fun, and she would be like,
or what's her name? The girl from the like fake documentary girl.
Oh, Philomena Kunk.
Yes, Philomena Kunk. Her.
I don't know if that's her real name, but that's the
her
one.
Stage name.
That's her stage.
That's
yeah.
I remember seeing that. Yes, I need Philomena Kunk to.
She would be hilarious. I need like a filter. I need like you can watch it like real, like have it be like a real documentary, but you can also like watch the Kunk version where she does it herself. Yes. That would be amazing. She's hilarious. I need to watch Kunk on Life. I still need to do that.
There's a live?
Yeah, so she did, because she did Kunk on Earth, right?
Yes.
That was hilarious. That was awesome. She did Kunk on Life, and that just came out.
I thought you meant like Kunk Live.
No, Kunk on Life.
Where is that? Is that coming out somewhere?
Yeah, it's out on Netflix right now.
Go check it out. I'm gonna do that.
But
it was so good. Part
of me also would really love the idea of it being narrated by Chris Pratt.
Really?
I think he would be awesome. He would do like a bunch of fun voices.
That's good. It'll be fun. Yeah, because there's so much. That's low-key why I love and hate learning about history, because there's just some things you'll never know. Mm-hmm. But I need to know what actually happened.
Yeah.
Great example, the pyramids. I need to know what actually
right.
happened.
It is so funny because it's funny to think about. I think, and I hope I have this fact correct, but I think it's something like we are closer in time to the period in which Cleopatra ruled than Cleopatra was to the time in which the pyramids were built.
Yeah.
Crazy thought.
Yeah, that's true. I've never seen that. We're also, I forget which dinosaur it is. We're closer in time to the T-Rex than the T-Rex is to like the Staphylocosaurus.
Oh, like
Yeah.
I know what you're.
Like all of the like dinosaur periods are so far apart, and it's like 3 times the amount of like human history. Like we're closer
Right.
to like the last dinosaur period than like the last is to the first dinosaur period.
Yeah, and we imagine them as all happening at the same time, but
Yeah.
it very much did not.
Yeah, Land of Time was just like
Yeah, right. They were like, oh, they're all together. They're all together.
they're
I
all
swear.
together. They're all friends. They eat the star-shaped leaves together. It's all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it is funny to think of like how history does and does not overlap in certain periods, right? There's a lot of things that we put together as like, yes, these all happened at the same time. But then there's also a lot of things that were like, no, these all happened at different times. And it's like, no, they didn't. Like, I love this fact. Someone told me this a year or two ago, and I think about it every now and then, that Abraham Lincoln, the fax machine, and samurai all existed at the same time. So it is 100% plausible. I mean, it didn't happen. I mean, okay, maybe it did, but it probably didn't happen. But Abraham Lincoln could have sent a fax to a samurai. They all. I'm like, what? You're telling me that Abraham Lincoln and the fax machine exist together, which I could see kind of happening, right? Like that's late 1800s, right? So I'm like, but like I think of fax and I'm like, I think of like an office, right? So I'm like, to me, like the fax machine's like the most forward, in time. Abraham Lincoln's in the middle. But yes, samurai, those still existed. Like in the exact, way that we imagine them.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what?
That's good. Yeah, it's so important to put your life in perspective of like the history of everything.
Right.
Like it's not about you. Unfortunately.
No, it's not.
But it also makes you feel more inspired because it's like, look at all this that has happened before me. I can do anything.
Right.
Going forward.
Yeah. Your life is your own.
Yeah.
You think, therefore you are.
I think, therefore I am.
And you can,
By Billie Eilish.
go and be radically free and
Yes.
choose, to live in the way that you best want to.
Yes. Well, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
This is not my question. So, tradition on the podcast is the last guest has left a question for you, and then you will leave a question for the next guest.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is fun. So, the question for you, left by mystery person, is what is one thing from your time of High Point you want to take with you for the rest of your life?
Ooh. What's one thing from my time at High Point I'll take with me? I really definitely the knowledge. No, I'm joking. I hope I don't forget everything I learned. I would have to say the relationships and the connections that I've made here. That being like a big one. And not to say that I have an expectation to, remain friends with every person I was friends with here in the same capacity that I have been, because that's just unrealistic. Like, but there are, some choice people that I can think back to that, I met during my time here that I do want to take with me for the rest of my life. And I'm also one for like making connections and like keeping those doors open, right? So I'm not the kind of guy who's like, oh, after I left high school, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to talk to these jokers again. Like if any person back from high school reached out to me now, yeah, I'd go meet up. I'd go like, even if I hadn't talked to them since, right, graduation, I would love to keep those connections open. So I would say the same thing for college, right? Like I want to take those connections with me through the rest of my life, and and I would hope that other people do the same, right? Like say, like
What advice would you give to like a freshman in college or like a senior high school in forming these adult relationships?
I would definitely say, make the most of your time. Maximize it, right? You only have so much time here. And a lot of people, like, this is going out to like the introverts out there who like want to spend a lot of their time in their dorm or just, in a quiet library. And yes, get your stuff done, like but maximize your time. Like go out, be willing to meet other people. I think that's one of the beauties of freshman year I miss, is that I just felt like the world was so bright. Not that it's like dark and gloomy now. Graduation. But so many people were just so willing to make friends and to talk to people that they had never spoken to before. And I feel like as time goes on, as you become a sophomore and then a junior and then especially a senior, people get kind of stuck in their ways, and they kind of get like, well, I know my people, I know what I'm doing. They don't have that same fervor for like wanting to like be open to experiences. So I'd say maximize your time, and then I'd also say don't count anybody out. I think it's really easy at the beginning to like have this idea for like, who you will be or what your college experience is gonna be and whatnot, right? But and we look to seek out things that are going to fit that exact mold, right? And things that might come our way that might not, follow that. People are easy to discard, right? I would say don't count anybody out. Like if someone is reaching out to you, take them up on that, right? And if you don't think like someone, like if there's someone that you're trying to like make a connection with, in any capacity, like don't count yourself out, right? The worst answer you can always receive is just no, right? But you're never gonna get that unless you ask. So
there you go. Well, thank you. I'll pass the notebook over to you. You choose your magic color and write it down. This is a situation where you just write it down, and this is my cliffhanger to get people to listen to the next episode.